Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Aliens and UFOs video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do another entry here. This one yet again based on one of your newer suggestions. This one having to do with yet again one of the most fascinating humanoid alien type encounters yet that I featured here on this channel. Just when I thought that I've reached the apex associated with these encounters, here's a new one to essentially raise the bar altogether. And what's really fascinating about this case is the fact that, who knows, it actually could lead to your next door neighbor being an alien. More on that here in a minute, but when I was reading this information, it truly makes you wonder who you know around you is who they truly are. On top of that, there seems to be a very loose connection here. Maybe there was an homage of sorts there from the Captain Marvel movie. More on that here in a minute too. But it has to do with this. You're looking at a representation of it now. It goes by various names, but essentially it's known as the Conil Incident. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all the fascinating and rich detailed information associated with this very memorable experience. So here's what occurred. You have to go back to September 29th, 1989 to be specific, and there was a location, a coastal village called Conil, Spain, hence essentially the name, the Conil Incident, and that's where this occurred. But before that time period, on September 29th, for around 2 weeks straight, there was a very strange phenomenon that was occurring somewhere near the village itself. It seemed to be actually towards the sea/beach area, and apparently there was these strange set of lights, something else like involving either a UFO or some other type of light phenomenon that was hovering over that location for that time period. I don't know essentially if there was a large amount of other people that became interested in this, wondering essentially what's happening, what's going on, why is this happening for the last 2 weeks there right across that coastal area. But finally there was a group of teenagers, all of them unnamed, no identity associated with them, so they remain anonymous to this day. But 5 of them finally decided to go straight to the beach, and this was around nighttime to be specific, to find out what occurred. And then here's what happened. This is why it became such a phenomenon, such a memorable experience for them. So at around 8:45 p.m., they go there to that coastal area, and sure enough, that's when they see yet again another UFO type object hovering near them. This one was very, very unique. Apparently this was something that was shaped almost like a half moon, so maybe half of it was illuminated, the other half wasn't. You know how when you look up at the moon you can see its different phases? That's what it reminded me of here. But otherwise, it did have these red lights that were within its interior. And there it was, just moving very, very silently, no doubt making no noise at all. And there it was also hovering towards the coastal area. But interestingly enough, this light actually then created a new light. Either it came from the UFO itself, or who knows, in the dark nights above it, there was something else that was there all the time, and this was a separate object. Either way, a whole new light appeared, and this one actually began flashing. And then when that happened, both of them seemed to flash to each other almost like as a point of communication. And then on top of that, there was yet another light over at a nearby port that also suddenly started responding. So the way I was reading this information, I counted 3 lights at this point, 3 separate objects, in other words, all around the same coastal area. And then, of course, these kids were just there on the beach, just observing everything, no doubt taking all this in complete bafflement. And they were about maybe a couple of, 150 feet or so from the shore. And then that's when one of them finally took out a binocular and started to scan the area. And what he saw next definitely stunned him and the rest of the group. This is why it's called the Conil Incident. So all of a sudden, he sees these 2 human-like figures, humanoid-like figures, suddenly coming out of the water. I got the idea that this was something like they were doing slowly, like not like they're saying a quick running fashion, but more along the lines like they were going at their own pace. They weren't really having any kind of issues that would cause them to hurry. There they were, just coming out of the water and then straight towards the beach. And the way these things look like were as follows. They were about 2 meters tall, so again, average humanoid-like size, nothing Bigfoot-like when it comes to their gigantic size. And then also they had these arms, but they were sticking straight down, either straight down or straight upwards, like towards the group, in other words. There didn't seem to be any kind of of bendable, you know, arm or shoulder or anything like that. There was just these two straight arms all together. And then on top of that, there was this long set of tunics, almost like a robe of sorts, that was covering these two things. They had these heads on them as well. They were considered white, completely white in color. They were faceless, featureless, and then also completely bald. So definitely gives you an idea how just unique these set of humanoids look like. But most interestingly enough, what definitely stood out about the group was this: they weren't walking on the ground itself. Whenever they got off from the actual coastal sea, then they went to the beach, they were actually hovering right above the sand itself. In fact, it was about 20 centimeters from the ground that they were hovering above. Clearly nothing else on this planet could cause anything like that, so this was absolutely an encounter of an extraterrestrial sort. And then these things, whatever these humanoids were, I don't know if they had planned on going towards the group or if it was just a complete coincidence, but as they did so, they just decided to move towards the group. And then that's when the small group of teenagers decided to run. They wanted to go ahead and, get the hell out of there because of what was occurring. But interestingly enough, something caused them to stop. Maybe they realized that these humanoid-like aliens weren't exactly giving chase, or maybe the aliens themselves decided that they weren't going to move forward any further. Either way, though, now they were almost 100 feet apart, and then that's when this small group of teens decided to stop, look around, and then that's when they saw these creatures do a whole other set of fascinating actions. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. All of a sudden, there was another red light that was now above them. I don't know, again, if this came from the other lights, like the other three lights I was mentioning earlier, or if this was yet again a separate light, something else that was there with them this whole time, just wasn't visible from before. But either way, though, this red light was hovering near them, and then from that, a bluish white ball appeared, I think, from that red light itself. So if you're keeping track now, there seems to be now 5 lights altogether with this encounter, with this incident. But this bluish white ball, whatever it was, actually went straight for the humanoids, and then it stopped right over them. And then this is where things take a very, very bizarre turn. This light caused these humanoids, these two human-like aliens, to essentially sit on the sand. I don't know if they were sitting like cross-legged or if they just decided to sit straight. Either way, though, they sat down, and then that's when they did something with their hands involving creating a shape in the sand right around them. It was almost like in the shape of a horseshoe. And when they did that, another bizarre action that they took was this: flat on their back, they decided to suddenly just lay down. Like they just dropped right on their backs, and then they stood there, if you could call it that, on the ground, just silently waiting for the next action to occur. This bluish white ball that I was mentioning earlier was still there the whole time. And then it started to drop down, and then it went from one humanoid to another, almost like it seemed like an action of passing a volleyball from one to another. You know how when you do so, you catch it with 2 arms, pass it to the next person, they catch it with 2 arms. That's the impression that I got here. They did this for about 5 to 10 seconds, passing this bluish white ball, whatever it is, from each other, and then this thing took on yet another twisted turn. All of a sudden, a third humanoid, can you believe that? A third humanoid appeared right in front of them. I don't know, again, if this was something that was there the whole time with them, or if just teleported, it just suddenly appeared out of thin air. Who knows? But this one definitely stood out from the rest of the group. It's because of its size. It was actually 3 meters tall, so you're looking at something around at least 9 feet tall, and its head was completely different from the other 2 humanoids. It had the head of what could be considered of an inverted pear. And so this thing was also featureless of sorts. It was tall. It was considered something that was just silently, almost like stalking them. But there it was, wearing a very tight, form-fitting black piece uniform, like a one-piece uniform, and it was observing them. And then when they realized that this thing was just there, all of a sudden it was gone. Who knows if it teleported back elsewhere, but the next thing that occurred just shocked whatever this small group of teens were. All of a sudden, these 2 humanoids decided to stand up from the sand that they were in. Remember, they were lying straight on their backs. They had that horseshoe designed around them. They were passing that bluish white ball between them. And then they got distracted, the teens did, by watching this other humanoid. But now that they were back to these two humanoids, the original ones, when they stood up, they saw that all of a sudden they were normal people. They were actually regular people. They were a man and a woman dressed in casual clothes, just like anyone else there from the village of Conil. And then there they were, just gasping at essentially what they were seeing. And then this group, whatever these humanoids were, now humans, just completely ignored them as they decided to walk over to some of the nearby villages, some of the streets there, in other words, and then they were gone. They disappeared within the crowds themselves. I got the impression that these group of teens weren't necessarily going to do anything to stop them. Considering what just happened, these things, whatever these humanoids were, essentially shape-shifted into regular humans, into regular you and I, man and woman type humans, and then there they were now concealed within the streets of Conil, along with all the other regular humans that was there. And so that was just a huge twist, like you could almost call it the climax associated with this encounter, because it got you thinking, it got me thinking at least, these things, whatever they were now there within the crowds. They're your neighbors. They could be your neighbors next door. They could be people that were there, let's say, at a restaurant or somewhere else nearby in some type of store. There they were, looking completely human, passing off as completely human, and there's nothing else that you could do to think that they could be aliens otherwise. So that was very, very shocking when I was reading the information, because of what happened as far as that particular encounter. Definitely gets you thinking, though, when next time you're walking down, let's say, your average street, how many of those people that you're passing by are, of course, regular people, but what are the chances, what are the small chances, however minute they are, that there is something there involving these two type alien humanoids, that they could be mimicking these type of humans that you're seeing walking down the street or walking across the street from you. Very, very fascinating when I was reading all this information and considering all of that at once. But the story didn't end there, because as soon as these people disappeared straight into the streets, that's when these group of teens noticed once again this tall creature, the other one, the third one that showed up later on. It appeared once again there on the shore. There it was, looking back at them. It was doing so in a silent manner, not necessarily doing any type of action other than hovering straight to over the ground. But this time, and again, I don't know if this was on purpose or just pure coincidence, it started to go towards the teens. So naturally, these teens decided to run yet again. They wanted to run away from whatever was occurring, from everything else associated with this bizarre incident. But then finally, some of them, I don't know if they got the extra set of guts for it, but they decided to stop. Like, they wanted to not do any further chase. They didn't want to run away. They wanted to actually confront this particular being. I don't know if it was, let's say, out of fear or some type of protection, to see, that nothing is going to happen to them. But they stopped and they started to go towards that creature. But then this thing, whatever it was, just silently stood there. And then, they observed it more in detail. It gave them the impression that it was not going to it was not going to have anything done bad to them. But at the same time, it wasn't going to allow them to do anything bad to it. And so that's when the teens just decided to scram. They decided to leave that place, run away, and they left this thing, whatever it was, behind them, forever lost in the darkness. So pretty crazy stuff. That's pretty much it. That's where it wraps up when it comes to this Conil incident. So you had there in Spain these strange lights that were observed for a couple of weeks. Then you had these teens finally decide to figure out what is going on. And when they went there, they saw these two humanoids turn into these real humans, you and I type, man and woman type humans, saw them disappear into the crowds, all the while having this third very tall figure, imposing figure, look back at them. The reason I was mentioning earlier about Captain Marvel is I haven't seen that movie yet, but I've seen the trailers and I've seen some of the other clips. You get to see those Skrulls, right? The way they come out from the sea, and then of course they end up shape-shifting later on to some kind of humans. I got the impression, what if these are like Skrulls? What if these are actual closest thing to real life Skrulls that you could have within our universe, within our world here? And that's why they're mimicking us as humans, and then that's why they're walking around to this day maybe somewhere there in Conil, or maybe they're spread out to other parts of the world. But it was a weird way of life imitating art and vice versa when it comes to this incident. But if anyone has any more information, anything else I might have missed, please post those comments below. Anybody from that area there in Conil, Spain, I'm wondering if you have more experience associated with this strange tale, maybe other lights that appeared afterward, or maybe other similar encounters with these humanoids, then please let me know. I'm most interested in hearing if there's been any type of experiences with these aliens slash humans, the ones that converted into humans, because you got to figure that they may look human, but it takes a lot to act like a human. So I'm wondering if there's any type of strange encounters that people have had there in Conil, as far as people not acting quite human, and wondering, if there's something else behind that particular figure. But if anybody has more information on that, then please post it below. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.